Keshav. Tell us, my first thing I want to ask you is, what is it that couples choose? How do they choose their destination?
Is there any location that you all have always dreamed of visiting together? That should be the first question you ask yourself. By now, we have a huge bank of itineraries built up. Amazing cities like Melbourne and Sydney.
Yeah.
Japan's great value for money right now, actually.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to do across the US. And then it can even be combined with like Mexico or the Caribbean.
And in terms of cost, what is it that it could be a starting point per couple?
The way tourism has exploded in the popular locations, prices are through the roof.
Yeah, so Northern Lights definitely a great experience to have.
It is a bucket list, destination. People can play with their own holidays and take a risk,
Yeah.
but I can't take a risk with someone else.
Hello and welcome to the Wedding Podcast. In our previous episode with Keshav, we spoke about the proposals and the bachelor and bachelorette planning. And now the most important topic, which is going to be of a lot of interest to our couples, the honeymoon planning. Tell us, my first thing I want to ask you is, what is it that couples choose? How do they choose their destination? And how do you ask them to choose it?
So I think it's really important rather than just, looking at destinations. I think first you have to look at yourself. You have to ask yourself what are the things you all are passionate about as a couple. What are some special memories you want to make together? Is there any location that you all have always dreamed of visiting together? That should be the first question you ask yourself. The second question also you need to ask is about seasonality and when you're traveling.
Yeah.
Because obviously honeymoon dates are going to be determined by the wedding dates.
Correct, which is typically, at least in India, it is between, November to February, March.
Typically,
and then again in the summer.
Correct.
Yeah.
Typically, it would be a winter wedding. Usually, we see
Yeah.
more of. So that sort of limits the choice a bit, because obviously you can't go to a place like Santorini or the south of France in Feb or March. It's going to be too cold. It's not going to be enjoyable.
Yes.
So looking at the when is also important. And lastly, it's also important to consider logistics, because a lot of our bucket list honeymoon destinations are very challenging to reach. Like Bora Bora, for example, needs 4 flights to get there.
Oh wow.
It's a minimum of 4 flights.
And there will be some couples who yet do that.
Yeah, I mean there are. We've done a lot of amazing honeymoons in French Polynesia. It's one of the places I would like to go to for my honeymoon.
Lovely.
But it's logistically challenging, so you need to make sure you have that amount of time and that amount of will to get there. It's not going to be easy. So if you want something easy, it might not be for you. So I think asking these questions first is very important. So to make sure you have a destination that you're going to love and a destination you're going to enjoy with all the logistics.
So before you start this with a couple, do you have a questionnaire, or do you go through certain guidelines with them before you? Because you see, this discussion, just like how when I do wedding planning,
correct,
and if the family hasn't decided on the destination, we could probably over 3-4 hours do a world tour. It goes around. So, is there, I like to filter them into, starting with certain questions that work and kind of start eliminating the destinations that don't work. So, likewise, how do you take that process? Is there a guideline that you
I think the first thing we look at, obviously we go through the same set of questions and we filter it a lot based on the logistics and the feasibility of things.
Yes.
And then obviously it is an iterative process. We do go through many, like you said, we end up doing a bit of a world tour. And luckily by now we have a huge bank of itineraries built up. So it's very easy for us to share with clients what a sample of their trip might look like.
Yeah.
So once they get a bit of a sample, it's easier for them to decide, is this for us or not. So we sit with them, we show them various itineraries. We discuss many destinations with them. I think a patient travel advisor is a must at this point, because otherwise you can go down a rabbit hole of discovering different places, and it does take time. It's something that it's worth taking time at this stage of the trip to make sure you get something that's going to work.
And I think today couples probably come a little more prepared also. They kind of, at least they have that clarity
Yeah.
of, they're
Yeah.
not coming to you and saying, tell me where should I go. I mean, they probably have a 2-3 destination shortlisted and they'll probably want to brainstorm that.
I mean, I typically get two types of requests. One is where people are sure that they come to me, Keshav, we want to go to New Zealand, can you help us arrange it? And then obviously that's easy for us to do.
Yeah.
The second are people who have too many options and they're confused.
Yeah.
I don't think people come to us clueless anymore about what to do. There are people who are confused because they have too many things that they want to do.
Correct.
So that's when it becomes a little bit harder because they want to do everything, but obviously you have to narrow it down. And then we go through various these things and sometimes we even look at, what's available, because if it's last minute and they want to, like, for example, New Zealand, if you're planning it anytime within 3 months of departure, it's going to be very difficult to get the lodges. So we even take that into account while we're planning a trip.
Cool. So let's start talking destinations.
Yeah.
And while we're talking New Zealand, maybe we can start with Australia, New Zealand.
Correct. I think both are fantastic for honeymoons. I think New Zealand's always been one of like the very famous honeymoon destinations.
Is it?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most popular honeymoon destinations, and with very good reason. I think it's perfect for those who love natural beauty, for those who like being outdoors, and those who like the mountains. Because you have the Southern Alps, which are a beautiful mountain range. You've got a ton of activities through. You've got everything from adventure sports, bungee jumping. You can do helicopter rides, and there are some stunning lodges in New Zealand. Like there's one villa which looks like it's right out of a James Bond movie. There's this one lodge which we book, which you can only get to by helicopter.
Does it have a lot of inventory or
3 rooms?
Oh, just 3
Only
rooms.
3 rooms. So it's in the middle of the mountains. You can only get there by helicopter. It's actually a sheep farm which they've turned into a hotel. So it's a very, very unique experience, and that's the sort of thing that you only get in places like New Zealand, where they have, this spectacular natural beauty. And then in terms of experience, you've got
for
everything.
For a vegetarian couple, the first thought that comes to my mind is, for a vegetarian couple, are there enough options with food, or how do you all take into account those requests with couples?
So typically, what I would say, I think nowadays vegetarianism is not as much of a challenge as it used to be. Especially like in a place like New Zealand, I would divide the trip into 2 types of stays. One would be cities or towns, where you have a lot of options. In any city, you're going to have a lot of restaurants.
And multi-cuisine.
Exactly. So you'll get something or the other. And the second is lodges, which are a little bit more secluded.
Yeah.
I would say 10 years back, at the lodges, getting vegetarian food would have been a challenge.
Okay.
But now with the way fine dining has evolved, all of these lodges have a focus on plant-based diets as well.
Yeah.
And obviously the produce you get in New Zealand, because it's so natural, because it's so it's such fresh, good produce. So the chefs find it very easy to put forward good vegetarian food when they have good produce.
And what kind of an itinerary, how many days do you recommend?
So I would say for New Zealand itself, you need at least 12 days.
Okay.
I think Queenstown is something that ends up being in every itinerary, because you have a lot of stuff to do out there, especially in terms of adventure sports. You have and got some great helicopter tours from around Queenstown, Milford Sound, and a few of the other mountains. And then the North Island also, I think you need at least 3 days to do one of the thermal locations.
Okay.
Rotorua is very famous, but I also like Taupo a lot. You've got some beautiful lodges in Taupo and great river rafting and stuff. You've got a 7-foot drop in one of the river raftings.
Oh, wow.
It's the highest commercially rafted river rafting drop. So these are 2 sort of destinations which come into every itinerary. And then we mix it up with like a few other places. For people who like marine life, we do Kaikoura, because you can do whale watching and snorkel with dolphins out there. While for someone who likes wine a lot, we might do the Marlborough region, where you have some great vineyards. You've got Cloudy Bay and some fantastic vineyards out there. And you've got beautiful sounds and fjords out there. So we would add that in for someone who has that interest. And then for people who like beaches and a little bit more subtropical weather, we would do something like the Bay of Islands, which has beautiful beaches and hundreds of islands where you can explore. So I think every itinerary is a little bit different, but
12 days is
you
what
need
you're saying.
at least 12 days. And then very often with New Zealand, people would typically add on an island as well, which is on that side of the world.
Okay, which are?
So typically with New Zealand, we get either Fiji or French Polynesia being the most popular ones, and there's some spectacular locations out there. In Fiji, there's a private island owned by the Red Bull founder. That island has everything from a golf course to horse riding and its own private airstrip.
And they do give it for accommodation for regular people?
Yeah. So it's a hotel.
Oh, it's a hotel.
It's a private island
Okay,
hotel.
okay.
It's got about, I think, 30 villas.
Oh, lovely.
But yes, that's stunning. And Similarly, in French Polynesia, you have Marlon Brando's private island. He actually moved out to French Polynesia to film a movie on this island. And he fell in love with it and he bought it. And it became his home for many years until he passed away. And now it's a luxury hotel. You know,
Amazing.
And yeah, that's absolutely stunning. It's 12 islands in one atoll.
Okay.
And you can actually, from that island, you can see whales. The diving is incredible. I think Kim Kardashian did one of her birthdays there. So yeah, it is really beautiful.
Interesting. Too long haul a destination.
Yeah.
Unless the family is from Australia.
Or even from the US, because you have direct flights from LA to Tahiti. So it could be something for NRIs living in the US to explore.
So guys, if you want New Zealand honeymoon, you know you have to go to Keshav, and you want a wedding, come to me. So that's an interesting itinerary and lovely. I mean, it's superb. What time of the year?
So I think New Zealand does fit really well for the Indian wedding calendar because it's best done in their summer, which is our winter.
Yes.
So that's one of the reasons it's so popular because it lines up perfectly with the Indian wedding calendar. The one thing I would mention for New Zealand, the visas can take a bit of time.
Yeah.
So it's important to plan in advance.
Yeah.
And French Polynesia can be done anytime, I feel.
And in terms of cost, what is it that it could be a starting point per couple?
So typically for an itinerary which mixes up, luxury lodges and regular 5-star hotels, you would be looking at about 15 lakhs for a 12-night trip.
15 lakhs?
Yeah, onwards. Obviously, there's per couple, excluding flights.
Yeah, I mean, just a starting point, just for people to get an understanding what.
Correct. And this is taking, obviously, what we do is when we're doing New Zealand, we look at like 1 or 2 very high-end unique lodges for like a signature experience, and the rest of the places we mix it up. Obviously, some people have an unlimited budget, so then we go luxury lodges everywhere.
Absolutely.
But we always have to mix things up because budget is an important factor.
Yeah. So coming to Australia.
Yeah.
I don't think clubbing ever makes sense because it will become too long a trip unless couples want to take off and have that kind of a time frame.
Yeah. So I think earlier there used to be that Australia-New Zealand clubbing thing.
Yeah, they used to do a lot of that.
Correct.
And I think yet a lot of those package tours
or
but
where
group
you just
tours have that kind of a
through
format.
the whole thing. But I think nowadays, especially on the honeymoon, people want to take it a little slower, go a little bit more deep diving. And I think Australia is really good for honeymoons because it gives a mix of everything.
Yeah.
Like New Zealand, it's only about nature.
Yeah.
Australia has some cities as well. So you have amazing cities like Melbourne and Sydney, which have everything from fine dining, adventure sports. You've got like the Harbour Bridge. You've got everything in these cities. But then you also have natural beauty. You've got the Great Barrier Reef in Australia for anyone who wants beaches.
Hunters Valley.
Yeah. You've got Hunter Valley. You've got the Barossa for wine and this thing. And then you also have some lesser known places like Tasmania is getting a lot of popularity because it's very naturally beautiful. They grow amazing wine out there. And for people who are into food, they've got amazing oyster farms out there. So there's this oyster farm experience in Tasmania where you put on these waders and they set up a table for you in the middle of the oyster farm, pick out the oysters from the farm and you eat it live out there with sparkling wine. So,
Not for the Gujaratis.
Not for the Gujaratis and Marwaris.
Who are going to spend a lot in the honeymoons.
I mean, you have, modern day Gujaratis and
most of them
I think it's up to everyone. But I mean, there's a lot of offbeat stuff in Australia. Like one of my bucket list experience for Australia is actually Western Australia. People don't know this. They think the Great Barrier Reef is the only reef in Australia. But on the western side of Australia, you have Ningaloo Reef, which is the world... Ningaloo Reef, yeah. That's the world's largest onshore coral reef. So for the Great Barrier Reef, you need to take a boat to get to the reef.
Yeah.
Ningaloo Reef, you can just wade out from the beach and you're on the coral reef.
Oh, wow.
And in Ningaloo Reef, if you time it right, you can snorkel with manta rays, whale sharks, and humpback whales in one trip. So that's a very unique experience for couples who like...
And the closest point to get in would be what?
Perth, yes. Perth would be the closest point for that, yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, Australia luckily has very good connectivity.
To cover Australia on the west and central and east is not very easy. I think you need at least about 21 days.
Yeah, if you want to do the full of Australia, you would need at least 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But typically we find people taking maybe 2 weeks and doing one side of it.
Yeah.
And then adding on a few days in an island again.
Correct.
Like either the Great Barrier Reef or even Fiji is accessible from Australia.
Yeah. But you would say that to touch more on the West would be a great idea.
I think it's very personal. I
yeah.
think for me, because I love marine life,
True.
it is something which I would love. But for people who want more cities, who want something more, food and wine oriented, maybe the East Coast is better. So, and definitely the East Coast does have 90% of the attraction.
Superb.
You have all of your most popular places are on the eastern side.
So now coming to this side of the world,
yeah.
Southeast Asia. I mean, Japan, I feel, is getting super popular,
Yeah.
and it's on my bucket list because
Yeah.
it's really the itineraries, the
Yeah.
overall experience is looking
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Are couples open to doing, or is it more for the mid 50s or people who have a largest, because at one point people said Japan's the most expensive destination, which I think has changed over the years.
So I think Japan's great value for money right now actually,
Yeah.
because A, the yen is weakened, and B, the prices out there have not inflated at the same pace as the rest of the world, particularly Europe. So.
Yeah.
For someone who wants like a city and countryside mix, I think Japan is fantastic.
And it's a great culture to understand.
The culture it's such a unique culture
Yeah.
that it's one of those few places where you go and you actually feel like there's a difference in the culture and you can appreciate it.
And you can
You
learn
know,
so
you
much
can
from
learn
that culture
so much
about
from it.
life, food,
Correct.
way of living.
Yeah.
You know.
I think anything that they do it at a very high level. So
Yes.
even like people don't realize it, but some of the best pizza in the world is in Tokyo. There's some amazing pizza restaurants in Tokyo. People don't realize.
There's this whole Japanese street food also,
Yeah.
I believe, which is very popular.
I mean, people go to Japan just to eat, especially non-vegetarians. But even for vegetarians, Japan is becoming a lot easier.
Lovely.
People don't realize this. There's a whole trend of vegan cafes in Japan. For example, Kyoto, because it was traditionally Buddhist, there's a lot of vegan restaurants.
Yeah.
Because Buddhists are vegan. So, there is the possibility for vegan and vegetarian food in Japan. And one thing people don't realize that, people think, okay, you know what, we'll do Tokyo, we'll do Kyoto, we'll do Osaka. But what they don't realize, in Japan, the countryside is very beautiful.
Yeah.
Especially in like the fall when all of the leaves are turning red. I think for any couple going to Japan, a stay in a ryokan or the countryside inn is a must, because they're so romantic, they're secluded, you've got hot springs, you've got amazing food. You actually feel like you're living in a Japanese fairy tale. So
And this
I
whole
think
connection of just going when cherry blossom happens in Kyoto, and
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much the time March.
I again think Japan is in any time of the year, any time
But
of the
I
year.
think
this thing.
winters will be pretty cold there.
Winters are cold, but you've got great skiing up north.
Oh, okay.
So if for people who are more adventurous, you can do Niseko and go skiing. I mean, you've got skiing across Japan, and again, being in the countryside, imagine you're in the countryside of Japan, it's snowing everywhere, it's white, and you're sitting in a hot onsen hot spring with your loved one. I think there's few things which would be more romantic than that,
So should we say that Japan could have a winter itinerary and like a spring-summer itinerary?
I think the only thing different in winter would be you add skiing in.
Skiing.
But you can do it any time of the year. And my personal favorite is fall.
Okay.
When all of the leaves are turning red. I think it's even better than the cherry blossom.
Okay.
Cherry blossoms are beautiful, but it's very expensive.
Yeah.
Because the whole world is there.
Yeah.
So I would personally do fall.
And what's a typical size of itinerary?
In terms of the number of days, I think you need at least 10 days.
10 days.
At least 10 days, because I mean there's so much. Like it's possible to spend 10 days in Tokyo alone. There's so much to see in Japan. You need at least 10 days.
Yeah.
And if you want to really deep dive and go into the countryside, go to different places, 2 weeks is also possible.
And from a pricing perspective?
Japan is something I think which can work in any budget, because you have hotels of every category. You've got everything in every category. But for a luxury trip, I think you could look at maybe around, it could start at around 7 to 10 lakhs for a 10-day trip.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And in terms of visa, it is...
You do need to apply for a visa, but it's fairly quick and seamless. It takes about a week. So
for the Indian
for Indian this thing,
travelers.
that's at the moment it's taking about a week. But obviously, apply for the visa as soon as you book your tickets. You don't want to be, scrambling last minute. But it does not take too long. It's quite easy to get.
And hotel accommodation, I think it's pretty expensive if you're booking too
Yeah,
last
if you're
minute.
booking last minute, it is. You should book it in advance. And luckily, Japan, you've got a lot of flight connections. You've got multiple direct flights from India, or you can fly any of the Asian carriers as well.
Lovely. And what else within Southeast Asia you think is like not explored much, but has a great potential for honeymooning?
Honestly, I think anywhere can be this thing, but another destination which does have specific honeymoon potential, I think, is Philippines, because you have a
Oh,
ton.
interesting.
Yeah, you have a ton of islands again in Philippines.
Yeah.
So beautiful beaches, some amazing properties. You've got, and every island in the Philippines is different. So you can island hop a bit and get slightly different experiences in every place.
Do you think there would be a language barrier or issue, or food-wise a challenge?
I think there's always going to be a language barrier, but I think obviously when you're
No,
looking
because if you're really exploring the
Yeah.
untouched islands, I mean, I'm talking about if these islands are already popular with a lot of Westerners, then probably there'll be,
Yeah. So I mean,
great hotels and
exactly.
well-trained
There
staff.
there are fantastic hotels. There's private island hotels. There's so I don't think if you're staying at those type of properties and hotels, you're gonna have a problem with language. Food, I think it's always, if you're vegetarian, it's always better to inform the hotels
Yeah,
ahead of time,
beforehand.
so
Yeah.
they can prepare. Then it's not that much of a problem.
Yeah. Places like Cambodia, known
Yeah.
for its temples,
Yeah.
and of course Vietnam. I probably would not think it's best for honeymooners, but what do you think? I mean, is that also a popular destination for honeymooners?
It's not popular at the moment,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean there isn't potential.
Yeah, I mean Cambodia typically has a
Yeah.
lot again.
Exactly.
But I would yet think Cambodia is more like a holiday destination where you'd like to just see another country, but maybe from a honeymooner's perspective or from a luxury perspective, might not have enough to offer. I don't know. I mean, what's your take?
No, I think there is. I mean, if you know where to look, there's luxury everywhere. So I think even
Beautiful temples.
the temples are beautiful. The culture is very untouched. So I think a part of that luxury is also going to places which are not so explored.
Yeah.
Doing something different is luxury. It's a
I
rare
agree.
experience,
I totally
right?
agree. Experience is luxury.
Exactly. So, like for example, in Luang Prabang, there are hotels which have like these beautiful private villa sort of accommodations. And every morning, the local monks from the temple come to the hotels, and they have an experience where you give the monks alms and you get the blessing. So that in itself, exploring a culture so different is the luxury of travel.
Yeah.
That's why we travel, because to do things you can't do otherwise.
Absolutely.
So, they're not popular for honeymoons yet, but they totally can be.
Yeah. Works well when people want to just do a short trip, and which is quite a trend now.
Correct.
To do this little short trip immediately after the wedding.
Correct.
And then save a bigger honeymoon for maybe a few months later.
Correct. So I think we see this a lot when people have like a particular destination they've always want to do. For example, Italy is very popular for honeymoons now, but
Yeah.
Italy, as you know, best to do it in the summers or at least the spring.
Yeah.
Whereas most Indian weddings will happen in the winter.
Correct.
So we have a lot of clients who come to us, they're like, okay, Keshav, you know what, we want to do Italy in May, but we just got married, we want to do something. So that's when you look for these smaller destinations. I think that's why the Maldives is very popular, obviously, because
Yeah.
it's a quick, easy flight, very, very like luxurious hotels, very romantic. But even the Middle East, there's some beautiful beach properties in the Middle East. You have some which are completely off the grid, very beautiful. Nepal and Bhutan again come into play for trips like this, where people have like 5 or 6 days to get out. They want to do something which is luxurious, which is relaxing after a
Yeah.
very busy wedding, and they want to do a main honeymoon later on.
One of the islands in close to Abu Dhabi, Nurai Island.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's owned by the Sheikh,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Correct.
amazing.
Yeah.
Super expensive, but great place to be.
Yeah.
And then Africa. Let's talk Africa in depth, because
Yeah,
I
so-
know it's your personal
Yeah.
favorite.
So like I was gonna say, if there was one place which I would go back to again and again, it's Africa. I think I've had the best trips of my life out there.
When people think of Africa, they only think of safari. The non-safari and safari.
Yeah. So I think Africa has everything that one could want. Obviously, safari is a major draw in Africa, particularly Eastern and Southern Africa. I think a safari holiday is one of the best holidays you can do, especially for a honeymoon, because you have an activity in the day to keep you busy.
Yeah.
Otherwise, on a honeymoon, you're always struggling to create an itinerary. And with a safari, you have a great activity for all day. A lot of safaris, you even have different activities. Like, for example, we know a place in Kenya where you can do horseback safaris. We've actually had clients get up close with rhinos while riding horses. Then in Zambia and Botswana, you can do safaris by boat. So you can do them either by motorboat or even in canoes.
Oh, nice.
So because the canoes are so silent, you can actually get much closer to the animals, get a much more unique experience. And then of course you have your game drives. And then for me, the beautiful thing about an African safari is how immersive the experience is.
Yeah.
When you're staying at the lodge, it's in the national park. You have the freedom to move around anywhere. You can get off the jeep. You can have your sundowners in the middle of the wild with nobody else around. I think that's such a romantic thing,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Just you, your loved one, and nature. So I think that's one of my favorite things about Africa. And the camps out there, they do these beautiful, beautiful setups. Like, you know, when we were in Botswana, they took us to a location, and we reached there, and there was this entire buffet breakfast setup, along with a chef who was making eggs for us live
How lovely.
in the middle of the bush. So, you know, setups like that, it's only possible in a place like Africa where they have that
I
space.
think they just do it so right.
They do it so well. They do it so well, and that's just the safari bit of it. And
Yeah.
if you look at the non-safari bit of it, for example, I love South Africa for
Yeah.
honeymoons because you get a bit of
Cape Town is beautiful.
You have everything a couple
Yeah.
could want. You've got Kruger and
Yeah.
you know Swalu and a couple of other
Yeah.
great safari destinations, but you also have the vineyards, which
Yeah.
have great wine,
True.
great food. Some like truly outstanding restaurants. You've got the entire garden route where you can do whale watching, you can do, you know, outdoor adventures. You've got even beaches out there, and then you've got Cape Town, which is a beautiful cosmopolitan city with everything you could
Yeah.
want. It's got great
Great-
art,
and great beaches.
history, great beaches, great hotels,
Yeah.
everything you could
Yeah.
want. So, you know, it gives you a bit of everything for a honeymoon.
True.
And North Africa is also great because you've got Egypt out there. Egypt, I think, is a very underrated honeymoon
Yeah,
destination. You can
yeah.
have like this total, you know, Agatha Christie sort of yesteryear honeymoon along the Nile. You could charter a, you know, the Habia and like have your private cruise down the Nile for like 3 or 4 days, visit all the temples. Obviously, you have the pyramids.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a very different,
And
unique.
Sharm el Sheikh?
Sharm el Sheikh is great. It's the perfect beach to add on to any, you know, Egypt
yeah,
trip.
you
And
could-
I think that's another thing about Africa. No matter where in Africa you go, there's a great beach to add
Yeah,
on to it. If
yeah.
you're doing Kenya, Tanzania, you can always add on Zanzibar. If you're doing Africa, South Africa, you can always add on Mozambique or Madagascar
Yeah,
or something
yeah.
like that. So always great beaches anywhere along Africa you
Yeah.
can add on.
That's really nice. Talking of Egypt, you think destinations like Jordan, Turkey, these also are popular with honeymooners?
Turkey is very popular.
Yeah, because it has a great itinerary. You can do
Yeah,
your
exactly. You've got you've got a city, you've got like hot air ballooning, you've got beaches. So Turkey is
Yeah.
very popular.
Yeah.
Jordan, unfortunately, in recent years, since last year, has not been popular, obviously because of
Yeah,
the
of
situation
course, of
around
course.
that area. But otherwise, Jordan,
It's
it's a beautiful country,
Yeah.
really great history.
Yeah.
You know, very unique locations. I mean, obviously Petra is the most famous one, but
True.
across the country, you know, even
Wadi Ram's beautiful.
Wadi Ram is beautiful, and you've got a lot of history out there. It's 2,000 years old. It's from the time of the Romans, right? So
Yeah.
when you have that much history, there's always going to be a lot of great places.
True. And then, of course, the Europe.
Yeah. So
Oh, God, that's going to take us few hours, I think. But yeah, I'm sure you'll sum it up for us.
yeah. So I think Europe. I think again, no matter which time of the year you're going, there is a great itinerary to be had in Europe. In the winter, of course, I think the main draw nowadays is Northern Lights. I think that's become all of the, like, it's everyone wants to see the Northern Lights, and with
You
very
know,
good reason.
recently I saw all my London friends.
Yeah.
And my son lives there. So
Yeah.
I saw all of them posting pictures of the Northern Lights happening
Yeah.
in London.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, of course, it was a short glimpse, but
Yeah.
people go to
Yeah.
for Northern Lights to
Yeah. So
primarily to Poland, right?
no, it's Finland.
Finland, sorry.
It's Finland, Norway, Iceland, and Sweden.
True.
These are like the 4 places
Where
in
you
Europe.
really-
In Europe, where you can really see it. You can actually see it across Russia. You can see it in Canada and Alaska as well.
Oh.
Anywhere across that ring, right? But obviously in Europe, these are the places which are the easiest to access.
But that's the only
and which are-
highlight, or how does one really have a wholesome itinerary?
around the Northern Lights. So I love Finland for the Northern Lights, particularly because it feels like a complete winter wonderland when you're out there in that season. It's white everywhere. There's snow, and there's a lot of activities like you can go snowmobiling, you can go dog sledding with
Yeah.
huskies. So you have these frozen lakes, and you can just ride for miles and miles. You can even do like sports car driving on frozen lakes. ice driving, which is really cool.
But other than that activity,
Yeah.
you think there's enough options for other things for a couple to do? Like, restaurants or if they feel like going out to a club.
I think it's a bit.
It's a more focused.
It's a more secluded, this
Yeah.
thing sort of trip. But definitely, like for example, some parts of like in Rovaniemi and Levi, you do have some nightlife because
Okay.
Levi is also a ski resort. So because it's a ski resort, you have people who go there to ski, and there are some, there are some bars and nightclubs out there. But obviously, it's going to be nothing like a major city.
True.
But it's definitely.
Yeah, so Northern Lights definitely a great experience to have.
Yeah.
And people who are really crazy about
Correct.
it as a couple.
I think it's something that you should do once in your life.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, whether for a honeymoon or no, I don't know,
Correct.
but definitely one should.
But I think it's great for honeymoon, right?
Yeah.
It's nice, it's pretty outside, it's cozy.
You
can
start with a uniqueness.
Exactly, and it's fairly easy logistically as well. It's not as hard as it used to be.
Yeah.
So I think that works well. Another great thing for winter is skiing. We got a lot of couples who would even combine a Northern Lights and a ski trip, or they would do a ski trip with like a Paris or a London or a city like that to get a bit of everything.
St. Moritz.
Exactly, St. Moritz is very popular. Courchevel, all of these places are popular.
But to book appointments, I believe, because I do know that you got to get your slots and book appointments well in
For
advance.
Schengen visas?
No,
Or
for your skiing also.
Okay,
you
so
know.
for skiing, it a lot depends on the dates because skiing is a huge family activity, particularly in the West.
Yeah.
So anytime there's school holidays, it's very difficult to get this thing. But luckily, when you're on a honeymoon, you don't have to worry about school holidays.
Yeah.
So I always tell my clients, avoid these major school holidays. Like, don't go to a ski resort on Christmas or New Year for your honeymoon because you're going to pay triple the price. It's going to be full of kids.
Yeah.
You don't want 100 naughty
yeah.
kids running around when you're on your honeymoon. You want a bit of peace and quiet.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think it's very important to avoid school holidays when you're planning a honeymoon. And then I think the main thing in Europe is obviously the summer.
Yeah.
Like winter, it's okay,
Winter is limited activities,
exactly.
and those are of course something that you
Correct.
can do
Winter,
only in winters.
exactly. Winter has its unique experiences, but Europe I think really shines in the summer because the weather is. I mean, it was great. Now with global warming, it's not so great. It can get a bit hot. But I think typically Indians go to Europe in the summer, and
we spoke of Italy earlier, where you said it's a lot on the bucket list for the honeymooners.
Yeah, I think Italy. I think if we're looking at Europe honeymoons, it's Italy, and then a distant second is Greece, and then third is France.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I would think France would come second.
No, Greece has Santorini and a few of those other islands, right?
Yeah.
So it does get a little bit of a focus for that. So but Italy I think is the number one, and with very good reason. Like I love Italy myself.
But again, just give us like a itinerary in Italy which could be most apt for honeymooners.
There is a temptation with a lot of honeymooners to go Amalfi, Rome, Tuscany, Milan, or Amalfi, Rome, Tuscany, and Venice.
Yeah.
But now the problem is, Italy is so popular. Any of those places are going to be incredibly crowded and incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
So what we like to do now is we like to mix it up a bit. And we might do a couple of more famous places like a Florence and a Rome, with some slightly more offbeat places. Like I would highly recommend the Dolomites, which are the Italian part of the Alps. They're really beautiful. You've got some amazing hotels out there. Great hiking, very naturally beautiful. Nice. And then you've also got some lesser known islands. You've got this place called the Aeolian Islands. Aeolian Islands. It's off Sicily. And there's this little group of like about 6 volcanic islands. You have an experience out there where you can take a boat out for a cruise and at night, and there's a volcano out there which is very active called Mount Stromboli. So you're sitting on this boat at night, you're having dinner on the boat, and you have a volcano erupting in the background.
Wow.
So
that's quite an experience.
It's quite an experience, and not many people know about it. So you can get beautiful hotels out there for 600-700 euros, which sounds like a lot, but when you consider the Four Seasons, Florence is in excess of 2,000 euros. It's a steal,
Coming to France. I was recently in south of France, and though I've been there before to Cannes, but this time I was, doing quite a detailed trip, and I went to some of the islands. In fact, one of the islands we went to at some point, Mr. Vijay Mallya had invested there, and it's a beautiful island. So
Okay.
there's a lot that can be done in south of France. Do you get a lot of requests?
We do. We get a
Yeah.
lot of requests for south of France because, again, I think south of France has a bit of everything. You've got great beaches, of course.
Yeah.
You have great nightlife. I think that's one of the big
Beaut-
draws
yeah,
of
yeah, that's
south
true.
of France. We always tell people if you want to go on a honeymoon, but you and your partner like a more lively sort of trip, south of France is great because you have amazing nightlife and great buzzy restaurants
Yes.
across south of France. It's also real. I think along with south of France, I always recommend doing Provence, which is like the French countryside. It's very typically French. You've got these in the summer you have these lavender farms out there which you can go to have a picnic. You've got great rosé wine out there, so you can do a wine tasting. You can rent a classic car and drive through the hills.
Yeah.
You can do perfume making experience. So I think for the more laid back experiential part of
Yeah.
the trip, I think that's great. And then you can do a few days in the south of France for a bit of nightlife, and then end it in like a Monte Carlo, which is like again a great city with great restaurants, the casino, a bit of everything. So you get a bit of everything in one trip.
True. How many days would you recommend for a honeymoon trip?
I think I would probably do about 10 days in the south, between the south of France and Provence. And if anyone who's going to Paris, France is going to go to Paris.
Paris, yeah. So
you
another
add
3-4 days,
exactly.
yeah.
And you keep Paris in the end, shop in Paris, and then take the flight
yeah.
out.
And all these villages like the Bicester village
Exactly,
and all,
exactly.
everybody wants to do their trips
Exactly,
there.
exactly. Yeah.
Coming back to the cost part,
Yeah.
I'm sure they're pretty much priced in the same range, Italy, France, or any other part of Europe. What's the starting point?
So I think Europe is one of those places where you can do it with any budget.
Yeah.
I think the budget is very dependent on the itinerary.
True.
And one of the reasons I suggest being a little bit more offbeat is because with the way tourism has exploded in the popular locations, prices are through the roof. So in Florence, even a 4-star hotel is going to cost in excess of 30,000-40,000 rupees a night.
Wow.
I'm not talking about a Four Seasons. I'm saying a regular, 4-star or entry-level 5-star hotel. So whereas for the same money in a lesser-known place, you could get a beautiful, beautiful hotel.
Do you think travel agencies or maybe even
Yeah.
like yourself would help in experiential Airbnbs or private home bookings, that kind of experience, or that's something you all don't really explore a lot?
So we don't do Airbnbs,
Yeah.
but we do experiential stays. We do villas. We do, private islands. We have, all of that is this thing, but definitely it's not an Airbnb. What we would do would be a lot more curated, a lot more. With an Airbnb, anyone can take 5 pictures of a room and put it up out
Yeah, and
there.
sometimes
You
you
don't know
could
what you're-
really go wrong, or you could have a great experience.
You don't know what you're gonna get. I can't take that risk because I'm playing with someone else's holiday.
True.
You
And
can play-
especially a honeymoon,
Exactly.
one would not.
People can play with their own holidays and take a risk,
Yeah.
but I can't take a risk with someone else's trip. So which is why we are very limited in terms of the private homes we do, but we do have a selection from trusted partners who we know are going to give us good quality, this thing.
And how about Portugal?
I think Spain and Portugal both. If
Yeah.
you look at both Spain and Portugal, I think they're both great, especially that they're a little bit warmer.
Yeah.
So for people who don't like the cold, I think that works great. They also have a slightly different cuisine, a little bit more like flavor, a little bit.
Yeah.
I think French cuisine can taste quite bland to Indians. Spanish and Portuguese cuisine has a bit more.
Yeah, but in Spain, that whole Andalusia region is
Yeah,
very
it's
pretty.
very beautiful. It's very, again, Andalusia, you've got great smaller trips to these very charming little towns. You've got a town called Ronda, which has like
Beautiful.
a
They
bridge,
have that,
a bridge over the cliffs.
Asian,
Exactly. And they have the bullfighting ring, all
the
of that.
bullfighting that
So,
happens.
and then, in Portugal, there's these great smaller properties in the countryside where you can like live a traditional Portuguese farm life for 2 or 3 days. See how they farm, see how they grow the wine, see how they do the beekeeping, Very different offbeat experience. Great for like disconnecting and relaxing for a few days. Like, I think a lot of honeymooners want to relax on their honeymoon because a wedding is very hectic. So they want these slightly more relaxing and private locations as well as part of a trip.
Any islands that you think we've missed in Europe?
So across the Mediterranean, you've got Ibiza, you've got Mallorca, you've
Yeah.
got Sardinia. There's n number of islands across Europe, But yeah, I think each of them has their own plus and minus. But yeah, like I said, I would always do a mix of more offbeat and more well known.
True.
So yeah, I think that for Europe that would be my number one recommendation. Don't like just do an itinerary of the greatest hits. Go a little bit off the beaten track, and it will be rewarding.
Now let's talk the Big Apple, America.
America, yeah. So I think America is making a comeback as a honeymoon destination. So I think earlier people didn't consider it so much of a honeymoon destination, but it is making a comeback because it's a huge country,
Yeah.
right? People think America is just cities, it's just LA, New York, Vegas. But people don't realize it's such a big country. They've got amazing national parks across the US, right? So we have a lot of clients who want to do the American Rockies. You have these ranch-style hotels in the Rockies where you can stay in the middle of the mountains for a few days, go hiking, horseback riding,
Yeah.
whitewater rafting and stuff. And then that can get very easily paired with any of the cities.
Yeah.
So, from there you can fly to Vegas, do a few days in Vegas. A lot of clients want to stay at the Beverly Wilshire in LA where they shot The Pretty Woman.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's such a romantic movie, such a, unique experience. So I think there's a lot to do across the US. And then it can even be combined with like Mexico or the Caribbean.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Mexico-
Mexico's again very long haul, but people going all the
Yeah,
way to America
yeah.
do club it.
Yeah.
I think these are more extended trips.
Yeah, you need, I would say, 2 weeks plus.
Correct,
2 to 3
you
weeks
know.
is when.
I mean, when people are looking
Correct.
at, and very often maybe when they're family or friends, there's a lot of catching up that
Correct,
they do.
correct.
But let's talk a little bit about Mexico.
Yeah. So I think Mexico, obviously both the coasts are very famous. You've got the East Coast, which has Cancun, Riviera Maya, Tulum and all of that. So there's great beaches out there. And then the West Coast, you have Cabo.
Okay.
So these are like two very famous places. But then you've got hidden gems across Mexico as well. You've got, for example, Oaxaca, which is very famous for its food. You've got the tequila region where they grow the blue agave. You need to make tequila. You can go there and visit all the tequila distilleries. You can do tastings. You have this tiny town called San Miguel Allende. It's like an old Spanish colonial town. So you feel like it's almost like a time machine, right? So you've got all of these great...
It gives you the old world charm.
Exactly,
no?
the old world charm. And what a lot of people don't realize about Mexico, you have great spas in Mexico.
Oh, is it?
Because they have this very old Aztec tradition of healing. So, and a lot of there's one brand in Mexico which focuses on wellness with a focus on traditional Mexican healing methods.
Oh, lovely.
So they have this one spa treatment where they wrap you up in hot clay and it like steams your whole body. So you come out feeling totally detoxified. So, I mean, people don't realize, they think just Mexico is just beaches and partying, but there's also wellness. There's also great cuisine. I mean, Mexican food is really famous.
Yeah.
There's a lot of art in Mexico. You have obviously the Frida Kahlo Museum and
Yeah.
the great museum. Mexico City has some great
Yeah,
museums.
yeah.
So there's a bit of everything in Mexico. And one thing people don't like, Mexico also has a lot of wildlife. So a lot of migration happens across Mexico, animal migrations.
Oh.
So on the East Coast, you have a whale shark migration. So if you time it right, you can go snorkeling with whale sharks. And on the West Coast, there's this one location in North Baja, California. There's a shallow lagoon out there, and gray whales come to give birth to their kids out there. And in this one particular lagoon, the whales have become accustomed to humans. So they have these excursions where they take you on these small boats, and the whales will come up to the boat and you can actually pet them. So that's a completely unique experience. And the last migration we're talking about is the monarch butterflies. This is a few hours out of Mexico City. If you go there in a few months, I think it's around the winter time, the skies are full of butterflies.
Oh,
There are
wow.
millions of butterflies. They migrate south in the winter and rest on the trees, and in the daytime when it warms up, all of them are just flying. So there's millions and millions of butterflies in the sky.
Amazing. While we're talking of wellness,
Yeah.
one thing we didn't touch upon, and as you speak of wellness in Mexico,
Yeah.
the wellness resorts,
Yeah.
even within Europe,
Correct.
the ones in Germany, the ones in Switzerland, which are focused on detox and rejuvenation, I think is a great option even for pre-wedding for
Yeah,
couples to
yeah.
either go individually or together, or even I feel after a hectic wedding. So, let's just touch upon that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think wellness is one of the fastest growing trends in travel because I think people have realized we have one body, right? And what we do with it is very, very important. And especially in our high stress, high pace life, a few days of a wellness, this thing can really give you a huge, huge amplified return on it. And obviously, everyone wants to look good on their wedding. They want to glow, they want to be thin.
Yeah.
So even a week at a good wellness place can really make that difference. Whether you do something more clinical in Europe or you have a lot of Ayurveda and holistic wellness focused ones in India. So, it's very important to see what's right for you in terms of wellness.
Yeah, what works for you? What do you
works
like?
for
Like
you,
some
exactly.
people like massages and some
Exactly.
people. But the ones in Europe are, they are non-invasive, but at the same time they
Correct.
do a lot of tests through
Correct,
gadgets
correct.
and they have these those incubator kind of
Correct. It's
high
it's very
oxygen
clinically
blast
focused.
and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think they are doing pretty well also. Do you
They-
do
they are.
packages for
Yeah,
resorts
we
like
we
these?
do a lot of wellness focused travel as well. In fact, our newsletter has a dedicated section on wellness where every month we're putting out wellness content.
Yeah.
So I think because it is very important, and for honeymoons also, I think we do always recommend to clients that their first location of a honeymoon should be relaxing. It could be a beach, it could be a wellness place,
Yeah.
it could be a spa place, but typically a wedding is very exhausting, it's very draining, especially for the couple. So I always suggest your first location should be relaxing. It could be a beach, it could be a wellness location, it could be in the mountains, but definitely make sure it's something where you can wind down, where you can just detox, de-stress for a couple of days before you get into the rest of the trip.
And now, lastly, South America. I
Yeah.
know long haul, but
Yeah.
can have a great itinerary. And do you have honeymooners asking for that?
So I actually think South America is a great honeymoon location because you need 3 weeks to do South America.
Yes.
In general, if you're going all the way out there, you want to spend some time to get a return on how long you spend traveling. And your honeymoon is the one time of your life you can tell everyone, you know what, please leave me alone for 3 weeks. I'm not going to come to office. I'm not going to answer emails.
you
I'm
can
not
take
gonna-
an extended
You
holiday.
can take an extended holiday for 3 weeks. So I think South America is a great honeymoon location because it is a bucket list, destination. There's so much in that continent. And it's the one time of your life you can actually take that time off guilt-free. And I think, again, South America, very luckily, I think it's an all year round destination. Different spots in different times.
Safe?
You have to be sensible. You have to be smart.
Yeah.
South American cities are not the safest.
Yes.
Like a Rio de Janeiro or a Buenos Aires, you have to make sure you're in the good areas.
Yeah.
If you want to travel at night, make sure you have a trusted car and driver. So make sure.
Do you have good partners?
Yes, of course. So make sure you have the logistics well in place. Make sure you're sensible. Make sure you're in the right areas. And for me, the real beauty of South America is in the country, in its nature. Because across South America, whether you look at Brazil, which has these amazing beaches in the Amazon rainforest, if you're looking at southern South America, Chile and Argentina, you have Patagonia, which is, I think, it's a bucket list for me because it's one of the last true wilderness locations left on Earth. You have, the mountain ranges out there, the glaciers. You can go hiking on a glacier out there, which is something you can't do in many other places. You can climb the mountains. There's a lot you can do. And you have the Atacama Desert as well in Chile. People know it to be the driest desert on Earth, but what they don't realize is that the landscape is beautiful. You have these mountains and rock outcrops, and you even have hot springs. So one of our lodges, they have these excursions where they drive you out to these secluded hot springs in the middle of the desert, and it's just you bathing in these hot springs, and there's no one around. It's beautiful. So people don't realize there's all of this in South America.
And Peru.
Yeah, so I was gonna say this Argentina and Chile is best in their summer and our winter.
Okay.
So great for like December, Jan.
Yeah.
That Peru is best for our summer. So no matter when you're traveling, there is
You
a
have
location.
options.
You have options in South America, and Peru for me is. Obviously, Machu Picchu is the bucket list item in Peru, but everything else about Peru is so amazing as well. It's got some of the best food across the world. I think I think that Central, which is the #1 restaurant, I think, if I'm not wrong, in the world, is in Peru.
Yes.
The produce is so great. It's given us avocado, it's given us chili, it's given us tomato. I think all of these foods have originated in Peru. So even for vegetarians, because the quality of the produce is so high, the food is amazing. And in terms of luxury experiences, there's a lot. One of my favorite train rides in the world is in Peru.
Oh, is it?
It goes from Cusco through to Lake Titicaca, which is the world's highest navigable lake, and it's through the Andes, and it's an overnight sleeper train. So think of the Orient Express, but through the mountains of South America.
Wow.
So it's a very unique experience. You've got these tiny lodges in the Andes again, and also you have the Amazon rainforest in Peru as well. You can do like a beautiful cruise through the rainforest.
I think that itself would be probably a 3-4 nighter.
Yeah, you need at least four nights for a cruise, 3-4 nights for a cruise. You need at least 5 days between Machu Picchu and Cusco and the Sacred Valley. And then Lima, I think, deserves 3 or 4 days on its own because it's got a lot of museums, obviously with thousands of years of history. All of the artifacts are housed in Lima. A lot of art and a lot of food. So even to just do the most popular places in Peru, you need about at least 10 to 12 days. And if you want to do the more offbeat locations like Lake Titicaca, the Colca Canyon and stuff like that, you can extend it easily to 2 weeks. And for people who are adventure and wildlife focused, Peru can be very easily combined with either Bolivia or with Ecuador, which has the Galapagos Islands.
Okay.
In Bolivia, the most famous thing is the Uyuni Salt Flats. Probably seen it on Instagram with, the mirror image of this thing and people cycling. So I think that's a really unique experience. We have this company out there which has the camper vans. So they drive you across the salt flat in these camper vans, and they park it in the middle of.
And you live in them.
You live in them, yeah. So and it's like these luxury retro camper vans, So you live in them. You have a private chef and butler with you. They take care of everything, and you sleep underneath the stars in the salt flats.
What beautiful experiences!
Yeah, exactly.
I have a picture running in my head.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's amazing.
So I mean, there's so many of these experiences across these more offbeat places, and then of course the Galapagos Islands, as you know, the cradle of evolution. That's where evolution was discovered. Some of the most unique wildlife experiences on Earth. You've got amazing bird life. You've got great diving. You've got everything from seals to sharks to turtles, iguanas. You can hike up to the volcanoes up there. So in terms of activities, there's a lot in the Galapagos as well, especially for a nature lover.
That's beautiful, beautiful. And it's commendable, Keshav, how you know these destinations around the world at the back of your hand. You speak so effortlessly about them. It just shows that how passionate you are about your skill, your work, and the amount of time, effort you put into this. Thank you so much. This has been a truly insightful 2 episodes that we've shot with you. And I think this will be the most useful episode for all the young couples, even for anybody who wants to plan their holiday and travel. For my audience, Pure Lux, as I spoke to you about, which is Keshav's initiative, is the only members luxury travel club that he set up in the country. With due respect and all pride, he charges a consultation fee to give this kind of consultation, and one must, for his knowledge, time, pay this. But for the Wedding Podcast audience, he has very graciously agreed to give them free consultation. If you seriously want to travel, you can get in touch with Keshav for this. But more than that, I just hope all of this information is going to be extremely helpful for you to be able to plan your honeymoons, your bachelor or bachelorates, and your proposals. So you know the man to go to make it even more special for yourselves. And with this, we sign off. Thank you for seeing this episode. We have had a great insider series on Part A, Part B, on bachelors, bachelorates, proposals, and honeymooning. I hope you guys love these 2 episodes. Please do like, share, and comment to us what else you'd like to hear in the future episodes. And do not forget to subscribe to the Wedding Podcast. And make sure that you press that bell icon.